Good morning. I want to talk about some real basic things that people mostly don't even ever think about. Right now, the economies around the world are doing terrible. And people never give it much thought as to why it's going badly for a lot of people, but going real well for some people, I might add. It really comes down to there's not enough wealth. Simple as that. There's not enough wealth. But let's ask the question, what is wealth if we don't have enough of it? Well, wealth is anything that humans need or want to live a human existence. You know, without wealth, you can live, but you have to be out in the woods picking berries and foraging and maybe bringing down a varmint with a rock once in a while to have a little meat and fishing. But that's not living a human life. That's not an option, really, if you want to lead a decent, civilized existence as a human. And I might add, not only a more pleasant life, but a longer life if you lead a human existence. So this wealth stuff, and it could be anything. It could be toilet paper, it could be apples, it could be mink coats, cars, well, whatever. But there's various types of wealth. But where does this wealth come from? Has anybody ever thought about it? Where does wealth come from? Well, take, for example, an apple or a potato or gold. Those are all items of wealth, potentially, because as such, existing in nature, they're not really items of wealth. They're potential wealth. Because before they can become wealth, they have to be dug up, mined, picked, as well as brought into the marketplace and traded for something else in the marketplace. In that respect, they become wealth. And that's the only time they become wealth. I think that's where you get a place like North Korea and Cuba. They just forget about that aspect of the wealth creation process. They take advantage of. They start from the point of having the wealth. They don't realize where it comes from and how to get more of it. And what's the best way to get more of it? Wealth. Well, wealth essentially comes from humans mixing their labor with the land and the earth's space. That's where wealth comes from at the end of the day. Now, there's lots of modern creation of wealth that can be done remotely from other locations, as well as naturally the part of the wealth creation process that brings the wealth into the marketplace requires many higher employment opportunities in an economy, such as advertising, truck driving, an accountant doing the books, etc. So not everyone necessarily, in fact most aren't, on the farm picking the tomatoes or in the mines pulling out the coal and the gold and that sort of thing. But nonetheless, they're part of the process, even though it's unseen and they don't realize it because they're a vital part. Somebody had to build the roads, for instance. So people involved in construction, it's all a part of the process. But at the end of the day, the thing that we're all working for is wealth. And wealth comes, again, from human labor mixing with the land. Okay. Now, for the known history of civilization, the governments, whether they're modern democracies, which should have been republic based on the Constitution, or fiefdoms or kingdoms or whatever, have all run their operation, Al Capone, for instance, they all run their operation on the human labor part of the equation. In other words, they tax the human labor. They've got their little bean counters, they're ciphering up, or they're getting you to cipher up for them how much labor output each individual is doing every day, and they take their cut. Now, this is nothing that anyone has done to deserve anything, any part of that output on an individual's labor, other than the individual themselves. They did the work. They're digging the hole. They're moving the rock. Why should somebody else be able to decide how much of the fruits of that labor should be spent somewhere else, on somebody else? Generally, somebody in a privileged position. It's nonsense and it's slavery. And it's completely unnecessary, because there is the land part of the wealth creation process that could be taxed instead. Not across the board, naturally, because all land is not equal. The most valuable land is the land with the best locations. The best locations are in the crossroads, in the inner cities, urban areas. They have the most desirability. That's why everybody lives there. That's where all the populations are. That's also where their labor is robbed, privately and publicly, through land monopoly. Because the economy is exactly backwards from the way it should be. There should be zero tax on an individual's labor output. Then you're no longer a slave. You get to keep everything that you make with your hands and generate with your mind. That's yours, because you made it. Nobody has any right to that. The land, however, that's another story. The land, well, you didn't make that. I didn't create the land. No one created the land. No one made the earth. Yet, you'll have to agree, it is something we got to learn how to share, or we have to fight over it. And that's what we've been doing for, all of known history of the civilization, is we've been fighting over it. And we waste so much time and so much energy and so many resources with this nonsense. Different power centers fighting and squabbling over, generally it's resources, resource-rich land. These are the things that should be taxed. The value of the land location itself. Not the building you put on top of it, because a building is just an extension of your labor. You go to work, you bring in income, what's left over you save up and you buy a house with it. That's still your labor. That shouldn't be something that someone can take from you. But the land that it's on, well, we all have to share it. And in fact, you want society to allow you to restrict access to your land. So only the individuals that you want to give permission to can come inside of your house. And this is a civilized request, I think, and that's how you should pay for it, through the value of the location of your land. Now, the beautiful aspect of this is, right off the bat, it eliminates land, especially urban land hoarding. Now, that's the way that a lot of very wealthy people and bankers generate a lot of their income, is through urban land hoarding. They hold a piece of land, or they make it into a little parking lot, they park cars on it, and it's just enough to pay the tax, which is almost nothing. I'll give you an example. When I was living down in Woodbridge, Virginia, my house, it was about, little townhouse, was worth probably $70,000 at the dip when I was living there in the market. I paid $1,500 a year in property tax, most of it on the building. Whereas there was a guy who sold his property a little to the west of us in a more rural area, but it was worth $1 million nonetheless. The property, it was nothing. There was nothing on it, no developments. he paid, I think it was $300 a year in property tax because there was no development, there was no house on it, there was no building on it, and all the taxes on the building. So he could hold that land while all the neighbors and other property owners around the area built the region up, and the taxpayers built the roads up and put in the fire departments and the schools and all the infrastructure that this guy who owned the piece of land was benefiting from by making his land more valuable. That belongs to the community. That's what you should pay back to the community to fund the community, the value of the land location itself. And the beauty of this is it would remove the need to build on the outlying areas all the time. And might add, the farther you go out, the less valuable the land location, and to a point where there is no value, especially around the farms. And the farms would be untaxed, which of course would be great for food production for the cities. The whole concept is the idea, the brainchild of Henry George, who wrote the book Progress and Poverty. I'd highly recommend you read this book. It's his masterpiece. And if you want to know more about how we can implement this land reform of what we're called Georges, then give me a call, contact me. I'm on the net. Don't hesitate. We can do this. It's a great time to do it now that the slave labor-based economy is collapsing again. You know, the bankers and their fiat currency have caused another depression. And do we have to go ahead and do this thing all over again? How many times do we have to make this mistake over and over again before we finally wise up? Let's go ahead and change it this time to something more sensible. It's been Tomas Estrada-Palma. Y'all have a great day. Bye-bye.